9.402. The pace of the Ferraris was outstanding compared to everybody else in the field. Can they do it again when it matters in qualifying? Jack Nicholls is standing by to lead the commentary. And Jack, it was clearly an imperious practice session for Ferrari.
Yes, but with a lot of caveats, because it was wet. We don't know what Ferrari were running. We don't know what the other teams were running. There wasn't too much really that you could read into that practice session, especially considering it was wet. And now the track is dry-ish. I would probably see the cars going out on intermediates at the start, but by the end of Q1, certainly by the end of Q3, I'd have thought, we will be on dry weather tyres. So going into that with no practice or running at all is going to be fun.
I think it's kind of cool because you never know exactly what's going to happen in this. One thing we do know, Andrew Benson, the BBC's chief F1 writer, is Mercedes are still struggling, and the wet weather of earlier doesn't seem to have levelled their playing field.
Quite the opposite, Jenny. In fact, they were 5 and 7 seconds off the pace, George Russell and Lewis Hamilton. They were struggling with tyre temperature, particularly, Toto Wolff, the team principal, said. But also this porpoising effect that we've been talking about all year was particularly bad. George Russell broke a floor stay in the session, and they don't look like they're in for a great weekend so far. But who knows what's going to happen in this next hour.
The championship battle is very much real and alive. Charles Leclerc leads the way, 71 points. Behind him is George Russell on 37. And then you have to go all the way back to Max Verstappen, who's 46 points behind Charles Leclerc. And Jack, reliability has been Red Bull's issue so far. They can't afford to have another foul up this week.
Verstappen's also not had a pole position so far this season. So there's that element to it as well. They need to get some big points on the board. We're not at make or break point or anything like that, but they need to get some progress, get some points on the board, and try and start to close that gap to Charles Leclerc and Ferrari, or at least not it be extended by another 25 points.
Yeah, a lot of points on offer this weekend, a maximum of 34 points, because obviously it is a sprint race weekend, which means 8 for the top scorer tomorrow in the sprint race, points awarded for the top 8, 1 point for fastest lap, and 25 points potentially for the race winner. So that is a big haul of points on offer. The crowd still in jackets, some of them in a few ponchos, but waving a lot of the flags. The Tifosi out in force. Jack, it's so good to see fans back in Italy.
Yep, certainly is. It's that's the sound of them getting excited for this Ferrari renaissance, and it's tremendous to see. And this is kind of Ferrari heartland up near Bologna and Maranello, which is about an hour or so away, I would say, from the Imola circuit. I didn't know until maybe quite recently that Tifosi is not specific to sort of Ferrari or motorsport. It is just literally Italian for fans.
Yeah.
I didn't know that. I thought it was like, no, because you have some sports teams and their fans have their own specific name. Yes. I thought it was that, but we are just saying the Italian word for fans.
Yeah, and sounding really clever when we do it.
So
let's keep going.
When Antonio Giovinazzi was in F1 and he had fans maybe, and he was driving an Alfa Romeo, they would still be Tifosi. It's not Ferrari specific, is what I learned only recently.
But it kind of has been coined into a Ferrari specific thing. I know it's not.
That's the thing, but it's not. Like that's why I thought that, but it isn't.
There we go. You learn something new every day. If you want to get in touch, we love hearing from you. Hashtag BBC F1 or Jack.
F1 at bbc.co.uk.
Lovely stuff, thank you very much. So, we'll set the clock. We have qualifying set to go. The risk of rain for this session is 40%. So that means in Jolyon Palmer's terms, no rain at all coming. Let's see what actually happens. We'll give you plenty of a chance to sync up as well ahead of qualifying for the Emilia Romagna Grand Prix. Jack Nicholls, let's take it away.
A lot of work going on Carlos Sainz's car, and that is something that is a little bit interesting to deal with. Now, I think we had this discussion in free practice, and I'll bring in the BBC chief F1 writer Andrew Benson on this, because we had a bit of a chat in practice about how there's not a huge difference between a wet setup and a dry setup these days in Formula One, because the aero is just the king, basically. So that's the only thing you want to get working. But if this is going to be sort of wet, dry, if the sprint tomorrow is meant to be dry, the Grand Prix on Sunday is potentially wet, there are going to be some choices to make, aren't they? Especially as right now, or once they've set a timed lap, Parc Fermé begins.
Well, yes, but not if the dry and wet setups aren't any different. And as you say, it's downforce. And the other thing, I mean, one of the things you could change, for example, for a wet setup, if you knew it was going to rain, you would make some changes. For sure, because it would be quicker. You might run the springs a bit softer, might run a bit more downforce, for example. They don't know it's going to be dry for the weekend, so they won't take those sorts of gambles. But these, just taking, say, running soft suspension, for example, in the past, you probably wouldn't be doing that now with these new cars, because the ground effect cars are sprung much more stiffly to keep the underfloor in the right place as much as possible, because obviously the penalty for doing that is what we're seeing. One of the problems that we're seeing Mercedes having at the moment, for example, we suspect their problems are rooted in some form of flexibility on the underfloor, which they haven't got to the root of yet.
George Russell, that's the sound you can hear at the moment. He's out in the Mercedes, and they've been really struggling with porpoising here as well in the first session. They thought the wet weather would hopefully help them, but it hasn't done that. And actually, Toto Wolff has revealed they had to lift.
Okay, copy.
Toto Wolff revealed
they had to lift in the straights earlier on today just to try and control some of that porpoising. I'm terribly sorry. Was that Lewis Hamilton I spoke all over?
So he's saying it's a pretty dry line out here, and Vettel, Stroll, the two Aston Martins, Zhou Guanyu in the Alfa Romeo, and Valtteri Bottas in the other Alfa Romeo, they've all gone out on soft tyres, so dry weather tyres. Everybody else is leaving the pit lane on intermediates at the moment. Now, I don't think we're in a particularly crucial phase of the session. So there was a session, wasn't there, quite recently, where everybody then had to bail back into the pits on their outlap and change tyres, and if you didn't, then you were scuffing. And I think Mercedes didn't, if I recall correctly. I can't quite remember when that was. It's not dissimilar to that start of the Grand Prix in Hungary, where Hamilton was the only driver on the grid. But a lot of the drivers seem to be having a go on the intermediate tyres at the moment. Just those 4 cars out on the softs. In fact, Esteban Ocon has just left the pit lane on dry tyres, so it won't be long until everybody's on the slicks, I'd have thought.
Yeah, I think they were watching the end of F3 qualifying, which happened delayed just before this session, and a couple of drivers tried to go out on their softer, or their slick tyres, they're the medium tyres they were actually using, and then there was a red flag, so it didn't really work out, so nobody could gain the information that they really wanted from watching that session. So they tried, they failed.
Katrina says, I found out about Tifosi being fans in general a couple of years ago when I started watching cycling, and found the spectators for bike races in Italy are also called Tifosi. And so they too thought it was just F1 before. There we go. Less than 15 minutes to go. And Hamilton is dropping down the hill into the first of the 2 left-handers at Ravazza, then on the power out of the second and across the line, and we will start to get some lap times coming in. Intermediates as well for the Red Bulls that have gone out there. Ferrari yet to leave the pit lane, so they're both sitting in the pits at the moment, which is always a confident sign.
Jack, just looking at Lance Stroll, who's gone out there on the soft tyre, and he is setting some very decent lap times right now, so I do wonder if that's the tyre to be on now.
I think it almost certainly is. I'm a bit surprised that I think some bailed in after their outlap, including the Haas of Mick Schumacher. He's come back into the pit lane. Sainz is now leaving the pits on a set of soft tyres in the Ferrari, so it is very much the dry tyre that is the tyre to be on. And 14 minutes on the clock. Leclerc now joins the fray. Alonso's going quickly, but none of the lap times that are coming in at the moment are 1:27.2 for Hamilton. It's not going to be very relevant for very long.
Might be the only time Hamilton leads qualifying for a while. Oh, yep, Stroll's just gone faster than him as well, so it was short-lived.
Yeah, absolutely. So Ocon going reasonably in the first sector on the dry tyres, but this is their first dry running of the whole weekend. Okay, it's only the first day, but it's dry running on a very changeable track, and it is, the air temperature is only 12.6 degrees. So as Ocon sends it in very deep into the Variante Alta, and that's going to be the challenge, because although there is a dry line, as soon as you're off the dry line, you're going to be in trouble. And if you don't have your braking points and your references ready, then it's going to be a bit of a challenge as Ocon comes through the final left-hander now. Stroll quickest on a 23.4. Verstappen second quickest on a 25.5. Esteban Ocon comes through and he's 5 seconds slower than Lance Stroll. Bottas now jumps up into second place.
Yeah, and it was an intermediate run for Max Verstappen. He's still not switched on to the slick tyres at the moment in that Red Bull. Just been knocked down to third with Bottas setting a second fastest lap.
For those of you wishing to sync up, we have got 12 minutes and 34, 3, 2, 1, 0. 12 and a half minutes left on the clock. Oh, big fire on the rear right brake disc of Alex Albon. I don't think he will be completing this session because the rear right of that Williams is absolutely alight as he makes his way back towards the pit lane. He's and it's just blown. So and that's going to blow the tyre as well, and this will be the end of the session for Albon.
Holy, I just lost the brake pedal.
So he says he lost the brake pedal, and there has been a fairly catastrophic failure on the rear right of the car. It looks as though the tyre itself is now wobbling around on the rim. In fact, the rim itself looks as though it's wobbling around on the suspension too. He's making his way back towards the pit lane now. He's only got 2 more corners to go at Ravazza. He's doing a bit of damage to the car, but he's not going to be out in the rest of this session as he makes his way back around through the right-hander. Another red flag. So they've thrown the red flag out there, presumably for some of the debris. Another very keen red flag, like we saw in practice earlier on. But Albon returns to the pits after his heroics of a week ago. Andrew Benson?
Well, you saw, people who are watching on telly would have seen that the brake disc appeared to explode, or something exploded, whether it was the wheel and the brake disc, whatever, on the way into the Variante Alta. And all that carbon debris will now be littered all over the track in the braking zone to that corner. So they're going to have to clear that up before the cars can go out again for safety reasons.
Yeah, the fire stopped at least.
That's nice. That's good for the team anyway, I suppose. There's still a few wisps of smoke being emitted from that rear right. And with the tyre covers, I was talking to a couple of engineers actually ahead of the season, and they said when the brake disc gets warm and hotter, you can't see it glow from outside anymore because of those covers, and it just takes away a little bit of the indication. And they've been having trouble actually cooling those discs, so it is a kind of pinch point. I'm surprised we haven't seen more issues, and especially this is one of the cooler tracks that we're at and cooler conditions, so it's a bit of an anomaly why it's happened now, but I'm sure they'll get to the bottom of it. But Jack, remember when I was saying in the last practice session, Albon could go from the back to getting a point again potentially because they like these C2, that's the hard tyres, and last time they tried something quirky, they're going to have to try something quirky again if they're going to get anything from the sprint race tomorrow or from the race, bearing in mind who will start last.
It's also interesting because we're quite early on in this session, aren't we? You know, it's not like the brakes have gone after a whole race distance or something. We're quite early on in the session, and on a sort of damp track, you're not going to be putting the kind of force through the brakes that you would expect. So quite a odd failure that for Albon so early on.
It almost looks like, sorry Jenny, maybe something's gone wrong in terms of, I don't know, this is purely speculation, but it's one brake, the right rear, which has caught fire on an outlap or something, and maybe there was some kind of finger trouble even, and maybe they've left some of the cooling cover in place and the brakes have overheated or something like that. We don't know. We'll find out later on from Williams, I'm sure. But there's quite a lot of mess around the track in various places. That failure was happening for quite some time, and we're now seeing some shots of the car. The whole wheel assembly basically has deconstructed itself, and although the sort of floor edge in front of the rear tyre was unharmed, the floor around the tyre we can now see is really quite badly damaged. So yes, Jack, you're absolutely right. There's no way that car's going out again for the rest of qualifying.
No.
Only done 3 laps. I think he was trying to set a fast lap when he was actually out there and had the issues, but there are now a plethora of marshals just trying to swing. They've got green brushed brushes. bristle brushes is the word I'm looking for. They're just trying to sweep all the debris. Not really. I won't go into the whys and wherefores, but there we go. So lots of them out on track trying to clear up all the debris.
I'm also trying to... A plethora of marshals.
No? Surely.
Well, but are they all... I guess they are all different marshals, but they're all marshals. That would be my only thought. I don't
Andrew?
know.
You're normally the grammar police when it comes to things like this.
Yeah, I don't want to comment. I wouldn't have used that phrase, but I'm not saying it's wrong.
Right, so red flag conditions, 12 minutes and 6 seconds on the clock. Alex Albon has climbed out of his Williams now. Session done, rear right blown up. And Albon is okay, and the team are all looking at the back of the car. And
would a bevy of marshals have been better for you, Andrew?
Yeah, that works.
Okay, right. Yeah. I'll use that in future. Sorry.
A murder of marshals. That's the collective. What's the word? Collective noun. Collective pronoun. Collective.
Well, you would know, presumably, having been one.
Oh yeah. No, but I can't even think of the word to describe the collective thing.
It's the murder of crows, isn't it?
Yeah, but what's the murder?
It's a bunch of.
No, I know.
It's the collective pronoun, isn't it?
Is that the phrase?
Yeah, something like that.
Okay. He doesn't know. Right, well, anyway, the aforementioned marshals are now back behind the barriers at the Variante Alta. For what it's worth, Stroll's lap time was still the quickest on a 1 minute 23.419, but that lap time is going to disappear pretty rapidly. Only 10 drivers set a lap time, and there's 5 seconds in the spread between Stroll and Ocon, who was 10th quickest. Intermediate laps, Verstappen, Perez and Hamilton were 3 drivers who were still on the intermediate tyres at the point that the red flag came out, but everybody will be going back out on the soft tyres later on.
Lots of you getting in touch. Thank you so much. #BBCF1. Chris Ribb says a collective noun for marshals is surely a post of marshals. They're not in their post anymore, so maybe if they're standing around they could be a post of marshals, but maybe not out on track. Rob Colley says a brush of marshals. Nice. And thank you to @VLH_5 who says listening to BBCF1 with my little one, and as soon as Jenny Gow speaks she looks for her. Where's she looking for me? I love that. That's very cute. And you put a picture up as well, which is even better. So let us know where you're listening, what you're up to. Always intriguing, and get in touch as much as you would like to.
Within reason.
No,
come on. Some of you get a bit annoying.
Reason?
Some of you get a bit annoying how much you tweet in.
Not as annoying as you.
Looking at you, Amit. No, it is a collective noun, not a collective pronoun. So thank you for those of you pointing that out as well. 12 minutes and 6 seconds on the clock. No, session will resume at 17:17, so that is in 4 minutes' time, and so quite a bit of a clear-up operation. Just having another look at Albon, where it went, and I think it was up at Piratella. So it was up at Piratella where he hit the brakes and didn't have any stopping power and just went straight on, basically. It was also really leaning the car on the back right too, so that's where it went, and just the rear right brake disc was just on fire and then blew up as he came over the crest of the hill.
Sergio Perez in the Red Bull had a very nice view of that. He was right behind him and took a kind of wide line out to the right, and then it went pop. But it's a strange one for Williams. As you say, they hadn't done much running on it. They hadn't showed any problems with it. And then all of a sudden, poof, just spits out a load of flaming rubbish to the back of the car. And because of those big wide wings now, it really directs it quite efficiently. Gives you an idea of the wake and downforce.
Certainly does. So Albon out of the running. That's going to help those who were potentially going to be struggling to get out of Q1. Although, to be fair, Albon was probably going out in Q1 anyway, most likely. But this is the kind of session where you can see a little bit of an upset.
Can I ask you a question then, Jack? And Andrew? Is Hamilton in danger of going out in Q1?
I don't think so, Jenny. No, there's no indication of it really yet. But it's early days. But the Mercedes, it's dry now, right? And the Mercedes has been the third quickest car. So, he had the difficult session in Jeddah when they got the tyre pressures and the aero balance wrong. But as long as they haven't made that kind of big mistake here, then in Imola, then I don't see any reason to think that he's going to go out in Q1.
Even though he was 18th in practice one?
Well, it was wet. 7 seconds off the pace is not where the Mercedes car is it? I mean, it was where the Mercedes car was this morning, but do you know what I mean? It's not, you wouldn't expect them to be 7 seconds off the pace in qualifying, would you? Unless something has gone really badly wrong.
And his lap was on the full wet tyre as opposed to the intermediate, so I don't think that's relevant. But I think in a session like this, a lot of drivers could be in trouble. If you don't quite get it right, if you don't, there is a sort of high risk in qualifying sessions like this.
Presumably, you want to make sure you're one of the last cars to cross the line in the session, in each of the sessions, really. But because it's drying track, makes it easier if you're out there last?
Well, one of the things about this session, Jenny, is it's definitely the coldest session of the year so far in competitive terms. Australia can be quite chilly in Melbourne, but it wasn't 2 weeks ago. It was sort of low to mid 20s. Whereas in Imola today, it's only 12 degrees ambient temperature, 14.7 degrees track temperature, according to the official data. That's not temperatures in which these tyres are comfortable, and it may well be that some of the teams, which is what was happening to Mercedes this morning in the wet, it may well be that some of the teams do struggle to generate tyre temperature. And if you do find yourself in that position, then you can be a long way off the pace. Perhaps not 7 seconds, but out of your normal competitive position.
I've upset Amit. I'm sorry, Amit. It was just a bit of a joke. My apologies. 12 minutes and 6 seconds to go. This session is going to start in 30 seconds, and everybody is quite keen to get out to the end of the pit lane. They're all queuing up at the end of the pits. What I didn't know, Karen says Imola is twinned with Colchester in Essex. And apparently
Colchester's done quite well out of that deal, don't you?
Yeah, and apparently there's an Imola garden beside the castle in Colchester.
So Jack's annoyed Amit. Andrew's offended the whole of Colchester.
Yeah, that was a bold move.
I just think that, yeah. If you're listening from Colchester right now, should we give you Andrew's email address? No, let's not do that. Usual F1 one, BBC one.
Right, light goes green at the end of the pit lane. Cars make their way out onto the circuit. Esteban Ocon is at the head of the field in the Alpine, just ahead of Sebastian Vettel. Then out goes Valtteri Bottas. Then it is the other Williams of Nicholas Latifi. Next out goes Carlos Sainz. The order, for what it's worth, the 10 drivers that have set a lap time are Stroll, Bottas, Verstappen, Alonso, Vettel, the top 5. Perez, Hamilton, Zhou, Russell and Ocon, the top 10. But those lap times, relatively irrelevant.
Just worth reminding people that this isn't the first brake issue that Williams have had. Someone's just reminded me that they had issues when their brakes caught fire during testing in Bahrain as well, which had skipped my mind, so I apologise that. But so clearly there's a little history there for Williams and brake issues.
Okay. Also, for those of you asking how the sprint weekend works, I haven't actually explained it. So qualifying today sets the grid for the sprint race tomorrow evening, and then the result of that sprint race, which will be about 20 minutes long, 25 minutes long, the result of that race sets the grid for the Grand Prix on Sunday, and there's points awarded for the sprint tomorrow as well. So that's the way it will work over the course of the weekend. Less than 11 minutes to go. Everybody on an outlap now. Some a bit more keen to get out of the pits than others. Ricciardo has only just left the pit lane. Sergio Perez has only just left the pit lane. And Lando Norris is the last driver out on track. So not particularly keen to get out there. Paul says, surely it's an orangery of marshals. I like that a lot. Paul.
That's a good one, actually. Just yes, points-wise, it is quite a big difference from last year. 3 points on offer for last year's top 3, the winner getting all 3, obviously, and then 2 and 1 respectively. This year, 8 for the winner, and you get a point for each place, so 8 down to 1 point issued for first to 8th. So yeah, I think that is a big difference and could be significant in the gamble, the risk that people are willing to take when it comes to the sprint race.
Across the line comes Lance Stroll to qualify for the sprint race, getting up to 190 miles an hour on his way towards the Tamburello chicane. Onto the brakes, through the left, over the curbs, through the right, over the curbs. Oh, bit of a twitch on his way through the second part of the right-hander, but kept it all together. And now towards the Villeneuve chicane, where he swings that in left and then right and then up towards Tosa at the far end of the circuit. He's a 10th up on his previous best first sector, is Lance Stroll, but Esteban Ocon's going quite quickly. Carlos Sainz is going quite quickly too, and in fact Sainz is 7 tenths quicker than Sebastian Vettel. He's only 2 tenths quicker actually than Stroll, but Sainz is pushing at the moment as Stroll now comes up the hill out of Acqua Minerale.
Yeah, Vettel was just behind actually, and he also set a decent lap, a very decent lap. He's put himself top of the timesheets in that Aston Martin. So good job from him following on from Stroll.
Ocon across the line to go second fastest, just under 2 tenths slower than Vettel, with Stroll third, Bottas fourth. Stroll has set the fastest middle sector on the power in the Aston Martin, out across the line. Leclerc goes up into fourth place, and Stroll goes back to the top, a 1 minute 22.556 for the Canadian, half a second ahead of Vettel, 6 tenths ahead of Ocon, 1.1 seconds ahead of Leclerc. But Leclerc is starting another lap now. Sonoda in 5th position. Bottas now goes up into 2nd place. We might see a lot of running in these early stages, just for the drivers to kind of get their eye in a little bit, and maybe not using all of the energy deployment necessarily around the lap, because we'll see whether they go sort of from push lap to push lap.
Yeah, I think there'll be quite a lot of difference in strategy when it comes to how much fuel they've got on them as well, so that, you know, usually you see them go out for a lap, do a fast lap, come back in, maybe do a cool, and then do another push lap. This one, a very different feeling to the session, isn't it?
Max Verstappen across the line goes second fastest, slower than Fernando Alonso, who's now at the top of the times on a 1 minute 21.363. Norris now beats that on a 1 minute 21.2. Still a very big field spread. Mick Schumacher 8 seconds off the pace. Carlos Sainz is quick in the first and second sectors. He's now about to cut the timing beam out of the final turn, and he now goes fastest, 9 tenths ahead of Lando Norris, and then Leclerc immediately slots into second place, a quarter of a second back. So that's a bit more like it from the Ferraris. Verstappen is on another push lap currently. Pierre Gasly in the AlphaTauri comes through and up into 10th position ahead of Russell, who's 11th. Sonoda now goes up into 6th position, quicker than his teammate. Bottas now jumps up into 6th place in the Alfa Romeo, and Magnussen jumps up into 11th spot. Verstappen still on a lap. His first sector is pretty much matching Sainz. His middle sector is 2 tenths slower. Here he comes now through the left-hander of Ravazza, then into the second left-hander at Ravazza, out across the line, and we'll see whether Verstappen can jump up the order and get in the mix with the Ferraris. He splits them. A 1 minute 20.349, just 300 slower than Sainz. Mick Schumacher has been grass cutting up at the Variante Alta, but the order is Sainz, Verstappen, Leclerc, separated by a quarter of a second.
And the times have just come tumbling down. Earlier today, of course, it was a wet session. They were setting the fastest time at 1:29. They're now cutting that by almost 10 seconds, well, 9 seconds, a 1:20.319 for Sainz. So a lot faster than they were going this morning.
Less than 6 minutes on the clock. Hamilton currently 18th fastest, but he's on a lap now. His first sector is 6 tenths away from Carlos Sainz in the first sector alone. Down through the gears through Piratella. Now dropping downhill into the double right at Acqua Minerale. Little lift, and then on the brakes into the slightly tighter right-hander. Really attacking the curbs on the right-hand side. Up to the Variante Alta. He's half a second up on Pierre Gasly's lap time, but that would only put him currently about 9th or 10th on the grid. Russell is actually quicker than Hamilton after the middle sector.
Quicker than him this morning as well. Just seemed at ease with the car, a little bit quicker than Hamilton once again, which is, some people would say surprising, but looking at the form of this year, maybe to be expected.
Here comes Hamilton across the line, and he goes 7th, 1.2 seconds back from Carlos Sainz, and Russell goes ahead of Hamilton by a fraction of a second. Daniel Ricciardo goes up into 4th place. Perez goes up into 5th. It's a competitive lap that from Ricciardo. Okay, his lap was set a bit later than the Ferraris, who are pushing again on the same set of tyres. Someone's had a moment at the Villeneuve chicane, I think, because there's a yellow flag out in the first and the second sectors. 4.5 minutes to go. Joe is about to finish his lap as he runs over the curbs and across the line out of the second Ravazza, and Joe goes up into 5th position. So the Alfa Romeo makes progress. Norris now goes fastest at 1 minute 20.168. The Ferraris.
I think it's Latifi, Jack, that's had a problem in the Williams. He's stuck out on track at the moment, so he could be causing the yellow flag.
The Ferraris now go back to 1-2. Leclerc ahead of Sainz, 6/10 ahead of Norris, 8/10 ahead of Verstappen, who on that last lap didn't do a full cool-down lap, to be fair. It was a 1:39, so it was about 20 seconds off the pace. So usually you'd expect him to go a little slower than that, I would have thought, but Magnussen now goes up into 6th fastest. Less than 4 minutes to go. I think everyone's going to run to the end of this session on this set of tyres.
I think you're right, and I tell you what, it's going to be feisty to see who's going to go out in this session. A reminder, Alex Albon already out in the Williams after a brake finder's rear right, which brought a red flag out. So who are the bottom 4 going to be that join Albon going out in the first part of qualifying?
At the moment, it's Ocon, Magnussen, Schumacher and Latifi, who had a very odd spin, Nicholas Latifi. I don't think he was on a push lap.
I don't understand.
I don't understand, he says. I don't think he was on a push lap, and then just cold tyres lit up the rears and had a very lazy spin on the exit of the Villeneuve chicane, then was on the wet grass and did another little spin around on there. Looked like he flat spotted his tyres as well. Now Russell has come into the pits for a new set of tyres, as have Vettel and Stroll. With less than 3 minutes to go, everybody else, you get the feeling, is going to stay out on these. Andrew Benson?
I was just going to say, Jack, that Nicholas Latifi's having an absolute mare this season so far, isn't he? I've lost count of the incidents that he's had through practice and qualifying and races, for that matter. So far, he was talking about it a little bit earlier, and he sounds a little bit lost, doesn't he, in that radio transmission? We've got Charles Leclerc out on a lap at the moment, but he was going quicker in the first 2 sectors, but he seems to have either made a mistake or backed off in sector 2. It's Vettel's a slightly improved performance from the Aston Martin so far, Jack, this weekend, isn't it?
They seem a little more in the mix, but it's actually quite a mixed up field at the moment, because Zhou is 5th quickest and Bottas is 9th. Hamilton is on an outlap, so the order eliminated at the moment would be Russell would make it through, then it would be Hamilton, Vettel, Ocon, Schumacher and Latifi. 2 minutes to go, less than 2 minutes to go. Lap time's coming in and they're improving. It's 2 seconds from Leclerc up at the top to Russell in 15th, so this is going to be really, really tight. Carlos Sainz is improving on this lap too. Latifi is going for another run. I don't think he came back through the pits, Nicholas Latifi. Here comes Hamilton. He is 16th at the moment, so this really a big lap for Lewis Hamilton. Can the Mercedes get those tyres up to temperature enough for him to put a good lap together? The car was really bouncing on the run down to Tamburello.
Yeah, a lot of the drivers out there being told you've got one-time lap, just go for it. It feels like this is almost a red flag restart situation. It's not. They've been running all the time pretty much, but it feels very disrupted this session for the usual pace of first part of quali.
Less than a minute to go. Hamilton has come through the... Russell is only 3/10 off Sainz in sector 1, so that's, broadly speaking, not bad from George Russell. Hamilton's first sector is just over 2/10 slower than Russell's, as Hamilton comes up through Acqua Minerale, and he's over a 10th up, but that's only on Russell's time, and Russell is improving comfortably. Here comes Russell through the middle sector, and he is 8/10 away from Sainz.
Ocon's in the pits, Jack. Not sure what the problem is, but it looks like he's not going to get another lap in. So Ocon goes into the list of people that will be out in this session in the Alpine.
Yeah, so it's just it's kind of 2 that will go out with Ocon, Latifi and Albon, you would imagine. Hamilton goes up the order, but only to 13th place. He has come across the line in time to start another lap, but I'm not sure how long he will have. Here comes George Russell across the line, and Russell goes up into 11th, so Hamilton is in 14th place at the moment. Stroll has started a lap and has done a quick first sector. Leclerc now to the top of the times, half a second ahead of Max Verstappen, who had previously improved, but the eyes are all down the bottom. At the moment it's Schumacher and Vettel that will join Ocon, Latifi and Albon out in Q1. Hamilton is pushing again then, so he must still have enough energy and deployment in that car to make it worthwhile doing another lap.
Latifi is out there again now in the Williams. He's giving it a push. Whether he's got enough in that car to get out of this qualifying session is doubtful, though.
Valtteri Bottas on the power out of the final corner. Checker flag has fallen. Schumacher and Vettel are the two drivers, along with Ocon, Latifi and Albon, that look like heading out. Bottas goes up into 9th place, but it's all eyes on Schumacher and Stroll. Here comes Mick Schumacher. Does he get ahead of Hamilton? He does. Hamilton is in big danger of being out in Q1. He is improving on this lap, though. He drops into the drop zone, so Hamilton and Stroll are down there at the moment. Stroll improves. Hamilton is 17th. So is Perez. Perez is in trouble too. He comes across the line now and jumps up into 5th place. That's enough for him. Hamilton improves up to 14th position, so that means Russell is now in the drop zone in 17th. He comes through and Latifi goes up into 18th, Russell goes into 12th, and Hamilton makes it through into the second part of qualifying in 15th position. Tsunoda and Gasly eliminated for AlphaTauri. Latifi, Ocon and Albon, the 5 drivers out. Hamilton got away with that by 4 thousandths of a second, and he was only a tenth slower than less than a tenth slower than his teammate George Russell, who ended the session 12th fastest. The order ended up being Leclerc, Verstappen, Sainz, Zhou, Perez the top 5, Ricciardo, Magnussen, Norris, Alonso, Stroll the top 10, Vettel, Russell, Bottas, Schumacher, Hamilton the top 15. Eliminated Tsunoda, Gasly, Latifi, Ocon, Albon.
How far are we off, man? That's crazy.
Okay, Lewis, currently 1.6 seconds off.
Are we through?
Okay, and we're through. We are through.
And Hamilton's only 3 tenths off Magnussen in 7th. That's how tight the field is, which is quite remarkable. Simon Baker points out that Bolton is twinned with Le Mans, which I didn't know. Apparently in Le Mans there's a Rue de Bolton, and in Bolton there's a Le Mans Crescent. There we go. Checker flag out. Mercedes, okay, they're only half a second from being best of the rest, sort of, but they're such a long way adrift.
In both conditions, whether it was earlier today in the wet conditions now in the drier conditions, I mean, they're just in a world of pain. And who would have thought this time last year? In fact, wasn't it Imola 2 years ago where they collected their 7th constructors title? And now, fast forward to Imola 2 years later, okay, different time of year, but they, honestly, listening to Toto Wolff at Mercedes, it doesn't seem like they're getting closer to a resolution. It just seems like there are more questions being asked each time they try anything. They said they've taken weight out of the car, but that could actually be making the porpoising worse now, where they thought it would make it better. So I think Mercedes are incredibly lucky to get through that session.
Well, the thing is, in Bahrain, opening race of the season, they were just 5th and 6th, and that was it. And they were in their own race. They were the 3rd fastest car. That was it. That was the sort of story, and that's where they were going to be all season. But it's very strange how they're kind of slipping backwards a little bit more, especially, you know, after this session today, Andrew.
Well, they've been the 3rd fastest car at every race, basically, and they've been relatively comfortably in that position. They're a long way behind Ferrari and Red Bull, but, you know, 2 or 3 tenths generally ahead of the rest of the rest of the top of the midfield pack, if you like. But this weekend, that's not the case. They're really struggling, and just watching some of the pictures through that first session, the car is porpoising. That bouncing effect on the straight really badly. I think it's worse possibly than I've ever seen.
At the moment, we've just had the first part of qualifying. There was a bit of a red flag for Alex Albon in the Williams, whose brakes caught fire. Lewis Hamilton only just made it through to the second part of qualifying. 15th fastest, and the top 15 go through. So Mercedes in a world of pain. Up at the front, it's Charles Leclerc versus Max Verstappen for pole position by the looks of things. Full commentary on Sports Extra. Yeah, fascinating stuff for Mercedes. Did you have anything else to add?
I was just going to add that Toto Wolff was saying between the sessions that they were having to lift on the straight. The porpoising was so bad, and we mentioned at the start of the session that Russell broke a floor stay with the porpoising. So whatever they've done to the car for this weekend seems to have made it worse. Maybe it's the track characteristics. Maybe it's where the porpoising starts on the straight. They're coming into that zone earlier than a lot of the other cars, obviously, and they've really got to get into the answer as to why that's happening. And as I said during the session there, people think it's to do with floor flexibility probably. The question is finding out how and where it's flexing.
Just looking at the times, it was ridiculously close from P10 and Stroll all the way down really to Gasly and P17. There was almost nothing in those times. But Tsunoda, who's staying at home this weekend and travelling into the track, is about half an hour away from the circuit. He's out in that session. Gasly joins him, which is an absolute shocker for them in their home Grand Prix. Bearing in mind, Gasly's gone really well here in the past. Latifi with those issues, and Albon, the other Williams, with that fire. And then Ocon still trying to find out and hear from the team about what happened to the Alpine, because his teammate was in P9 and Esteban was in the garage and going nowhere. So question marks over Alpine and their reliability again. Worth remembering that Ocon changed his power unit coming into this weekend. So I wonder what's gone on there. We shall wait and find out, and as soon as I know, I'll let you know.
Driver of the session, Jenny?
Oh, driver of the session. Crikey, Rikey. Wasn't expecting that. We don't normally do that.
Come on, it's a no-brainer.
Well,
it's a no-brainer.
He went fastest.
Come on.
By a long way.
It's this guy.
We thank you too. Well done, Joe. Well done.
Let's go, boys. Yes.
Joe, fourth quickest.
Oh, fair.
In the first part of qualifying, ahead of Perez, Ricciardo, Magnussen, Norris.
Okay, mate. Fortunately, that is us done.
Yeah, just couldn't shift up anymore.
No, it's clearly an issue. It's not you.
Couldn't shift up anymore, I think he said. So,
Ocon.
yeah.
Ocon team radio, wasn't it? That's why he's out. So that's obviously... Well, I'm terribly sorry. I'm very remiss of me not to say Joe. Of course. Well, edit that in the replay.
Jenny, he's 7/10 quicker than teammate Valtteri Bottas, Zhou Guanyu, in that session, which is very impressive. And just while, in case people are wondering, Charles Leclerc is half a second clear at the front of the field, with Verstappen in second place.
Should have a one-time lap before the rain is coming.
Okay, so that's Carlos Sainz, who's at the end of the pit lane. Oh, he's already out on track. He's the sound you can hear. And he has been told we're going to get one lap, and then the rain is coming.
Just in case it wasn't mixed up enough in this session and we haven't got enough drama for you, let's add some rain to it. Great.
Oh, and Hamilton's just run over his tyre warmer on the front left. The tyre warmer wasn't off. Hamilton pulled forward and had to pull it out from underneath the car. I'm not going to make too big a deal of that, but he's now making his way to the end of the pit lane. We will see then whether this rain is coming. Not very hilly, but a bit hilly around Imola. Here's Leclerc's radio.
One-time lap before the rain hits, and it will arrive from turns 2, 3, 4.
So the rain will arrive from turns 2, 3 and 4, which is...
How much, though? That's what we want to know.
Down towards Tosa. But any rain and you'll be slower than your first timed lap. So that's why it's so important for these drivers as they now come up towards Tosa, which is at the far end of the circuit. The rain's going to come from basically the southeast, and the 2, 3, 4 is the Tamburello chicane.
So if you've set your car up for dry, let's say they did take the gamble, and we know that there are different settings this year. It's a different car. Some of them suffer a little bit more than others with downforce and ride heights. If you set your car up thinking, yeah, this is dry now, and we've got rain on the way, some of the engineers are going to get themselves into a pickle overthinking this, I fear.
Too late now. Sainz throws it into the first corner, carried so much speed into Tamburello. That was quite remarkable. He's now coming up through the gears into the left-hander and then the right of Villeneuve and then up towards Tosa. First sector split is a 25.794, a couple of tenths slower than Max Verstappen managed in the first part of qualifying. Now he's coming up towards Piratella, very quick left-hander. down to 5th gear, back on the power. Over the curbs on the exit, now dropping down the hill to this double-righted Acqua Minerale. Barely a lift into the first part of the corner, little wide maybe on the exit. Now up towards the Variante Alta, a slow right-left chicane. So much curb on the way in.
Just having a look at Verstappen, he's set a decent time. He was topping the leaderboard. He's now about half a second behind Charles Leclerc, but it looks like he's going for another push lap straight away.
Yeah, no lap time set in Q2 as of the moment. Verstappen is 0.3 quicker than Sainz in the first sector and half a second quicker than Leclerc in the first sector. Sainz comes through to do a 1 minute 18.990, but if this is the only quick lap they're getting before the rain comes, it's not actually that great for Ferrari. Sainz goes quickest on that 18.9, but he's only 0.3 quicker than Lando Norris. Sebastian Vettel goes into 3rd place, but Verstappen has set the fastest middle sector as well. So the Dutchman absolutely flying in the Red Bull. We're going to get Charles Leclerc's lap time in a moment too. Bottas comes through in his 4th.
And keep pushing, should rain come in 2 minutes, keep pushing.
Now Verstappen goes to the top, only 0.2 clear of Sainz. Sainz was told to keep pushing because there's more rain coming in 2 minutes, or not more rain, but rain coming in 2 minutes. Verstappen, Sainz, Norris is the top 3. Leclerc has just slotted into 4th place. Not a great lap that from the Ferrari driver, 0.8 away from Verstappen. Perhaps a mistake out there somewhere. Here comes George Russell. Perez jumps up into 4th position. Russell across the line in the Mercedes, and it is 10th place, 2 seconds slower than Max Verstappen, and Hamilton goes 12th, 2.3 seconds slower than Verstappen. Verstappen, Sainz, Norris, Perez, Leclerc, the top 5 at the moment, and Sainz is off. Carlos Sainz is in the wall at the Variante Alta. Red flag is out, front left is broken, and Sainz is out of qualifying.
Oh, sorry guys.
He apologises on the radio, but he has hit the wall on the left front. The front left is completely broken. He's going to haul himself out of that Ferrari. Red flag out with less than 11 minutes to go. Big error that.
It was win it or bin it, wasn't it, for him? And he gave it absolutely everything. He was on such a good lap, and then he was in the wall. Such painful times. He's just re-signed with Ferrari. Really wanted to come into this weekend and prove what he's got, and that he can take the challenge to Charles Leclerc. And unfortunately for him, second weekend in a row for him, Australia crashed out, and now crashed out in qualifying.
Yes, Jenny. Sorry, Jack.
He wasn't on a good lap.
No,
really.
And I think what's really interesting is, as Jenny's just alluded to there, he had made a bit of a hash of the race in Australia. It has to be said. He was a bit unfortunate in qualifying to end up 9th, but he made a bad start, dropped down a few places, was trying to make up ground, got it completely wrong going around the outside of someone into turns 9 and 10 at Melbourne and crashed. And yesterday he was talking about how he'd been surprised that he hadn't been able to handle the pressure of finding himself in that situation, and looks a little bit like same thing's happened again.
He's not actually at the Variante Alta. My apologies. I thought he was, but he's at the second Ravazza. So he's come through the first left-hander at Ravazza, then got on the power. Well, the back end's gone as he's turned in to the second Ravazza, and the car's spun around on him and gone into the wall. My apologies. I thought he was at the top of the hill there at the Variante Alta, but no, second Ravazza, the final corner on the circuit for Sainz, and he is out.
I just wonder if that's done gearbox as well, because it was a little tap on the rear left as he kind of went into the barriers, and that can be enough just to do the gearbox. Remember, this is qualifying. Yes, it's Friday, but qualifying, which means the cars go into parc fermé rules. So a new gearbox would be a penalty if he had to have it. And it's just, he gets onto the back of a bike. The ambulance is down there, but he chooses to get onto the back of a moped, doesn't sign an autograph, funnily enough, and goes back. I fear this might be one of those moments where he keeps his helmet firmly on and skulks back to the Ferrari garage.
So, Jenny, this is bad news for driver and team in some ways, in lots of ways, because not only is Sainz desperately needs to make up some points on Leclerc if he's not to become Leclerc's wingman before too long this season, and he's now consigned himself to starting 10th probably in the sprint race tomorrow. He'll make up some ground, one would assume, because the Ferrari's quick. but he's starting further back than he needs to. So that's bad for him in the championship. And then from the team's point of view, assuming the two Red Bulls qualify in their positions, it leaves Leclerc on his own again against two Red Bulls. Now in Australia that worked out okay for him because he was quick enough to handle them no matter what they threw at him. He just drove off into the distance basically. But that's not necessarily going to happen at every race. And if it's close at Imola like it was in Bahrain and Jeddah, then that really puts Leclerc on the back foot, and it's the sort of thing Ferrari really don't need when they've finally got a chance for championship.
Yeah, they desperately need both drivers to perform, don't they, at this moment in time? And I tell you what, this isn't great news for Lewis Hamilton or George Russell either. That red flag coming out means they're both languishing in the drop zone at the moment. Russell 11th, Hamilton 13th, and the rain is starting to come down now at Imola, so it could be they aren't in a position to be able to set a faster time. They could find themselves out of qualifying in part 2.
I mean, part of me would be impressed if they made it through to Q3, to be honest, because
That's true.
they don't seemingly have the pace to be there after the first part of qualifying. But you're absolutely correct with the rain now on its way. That's what Ferrari were thinking about and were saying to their drivers. Yeah, raining in the pit lane at the moment, Jack. Now just fine drips and drops coming down, but it's here. It's a really unnecessary crash that for Sainz. It's because he's at the final corner as well. So as I say, I thought he was up at the top of the hill. He's at the final corner. The lap is all right, but not particularly notable. You're second already. It's Q2. Okay, the rain's coming, but you got the session's going to start in 4 minutes. But it's really, really unnecessary, and it's those kind of errors that we saw from both Ferrari drivers really for a lot of last season. That's what I was going to say actually, Jack, is that it's not unfamiliar territory, because we saw him crashing a lot, especially in qualifying and free practice sessions last year in that Ferrari. Now, the Ferrari to me seems a more drivable car this year. Certainly Charles Leclerc is making it look a more drivable car this year. So does that just come down to the setup of the car? Does that come down to the fact that, I don't know, maybe Sainz pushes and overdrives the car because he's just not as fast? I don't know what that comes down to, but it's clear, isn't it? You can see it. Amit has tweeted in again and says, hopefully I don't annoy Jack by tweeting this. Ferrari drivers, both exceptionally quick, but do have a mistake in them out of nowhere. And if these mistakes continue, it could hurt their championship. Racing Insider says, Carlos Sainz should have won last year's wet Hungarian Grand Prix, but couldn't handle the pressure there either, he says. So we'll see. Some of these hot takes are a little harsh, but it's an interesting discussion. Sainz is such a likeable chap as well, and everyone wills Ferrari on because everybody wants them to come back in and for it to be a 3-horse race at the front with Mercedes there as well, and Red Bull and whoever else will take the opportunity to challenge. I do feel for Sainz. When you come from such great pedigree, when you have such great expectations, when you've just signed a contract to stay at Ferrari, and then you have a weekend like this, it's a grotty place to be as the umbrellas come out and the stands for the Tifosi, that's all fans of everything in the whole of Italy, their umbrellas are now well and truly out, protecting themselves from the rain that is coming down. Andrew?
Well, Sainz has been saying this year that he's not comfortable in the Ferrari yet, not completely comfortable, and he's admitted that Leclerc has adapted to the new driving style required of these cars much more quickly than he has. He's not been far off, to be fair, a 10th or 2 most races. As I said earlier, Australia didn't go well for him, and obviously now this hasn't gone well for him either. But it's been interesting to see, at least I'm now jumping to a conclusion slightly perhaps after these 2 last races, but Leclerc was saying in Australia that he's been able to relax a little bit into his driving and not feel like he's having to overreach to get the performance out of the car because it's fully competitive now. It's the first fully competitive car he's had in Formula 1, pretty much, apart from a few races in 2019. Sainz, though, is in a different place. He's finding himself a little bit off Leclerc, and he's in a position where he can see his season, even if he's not admitting it yet, but the reality is he can see his season unravelling before his eyes very quickly. And I thought it was very open of him yesterday to admit that psychologically he hadn't handled the effects of finding himself in a difficult position in Australia very well. Very few drivers will be as open as that with the media. They might say it privately, but not in a press conference. And now he's left himself open to the same accusations and the same questions after this incident.
I just thinking about that. Is that the culture that maybe Mattia Binotto is trying to breed within his team? I mean, we're used to Ferrari kind of being a bit of a stone wall when it comes to actually expressing thoughts and feelings. But if you think about Charles Leclerc, the type of driver he is, how emotive he is, how quick he is to take the blame when things go wrong, maybe too much too quickly sometimes. Maybe that's the new era of Ferrari.
Well, it's funny you should say that, Jenny. I actually asked Mattia Binotto about that aspect of Leclerc last year, and he said he thought Leclerc goes too far in taking the blame for these sorts of incidents when he makes errors. He said, we're a team, we do these things together. It's not just the driver making mistakes, he's making mistakes for a reason, and so I don't think Binotto is trying to push forward that sort of self-flagellation aspect which Leclerc does have about himself. He's very honest about the mistakes he makes. Maybe Sainz has learned it from Leclerc, I don't know, but doesn't sound from what Binotto said to me last year anyway that he's learning it from Binotto.
Catherine says, I think the harshness towards Sainz isn't warranted. Remember, Charles, in his time at Ferrari, has had a lot of bad mistakes, Baku, for example. And Chris says, Carlos Sainz will be out of F1 before he's 30. So there we go. Splits opinion a little bit on that one. So, session has restarted. Currently, the cars eliminated would be Russell in 11th, Schumacher 12th, Hamilton 13th, Joe, unfortunately, in 14th for him, 15th for Lance Stroll. We will see whether we get cars on track trying to improve the lap time, how wet it is exactly. Phil Hawson has a stat here. Andrew, this is one for you to guess. When was the last time Mercedes failed to have a car in the top 10 shootout?
It's got to be back in the Schumacher era.
What race?
I don't know.
Go on, guess.
It's just a random guess from any year between 2010 and 2010 or 2011, I'm going to say. One of those 2 years.
2012.
Really?
2012, Suzuka.
Okay, well, there you go.
Says Philip Horton. He's an esteemed journalist. Well, he's a journalist. He's a lovely boy, and he has said that that's true. So I'm saying it's true.
Just to pick up on Chris Thomas, who says he believes Carlos Sainz will be out of F1 before he's 30.
Is he 32?
That's harsh. I mean, he's 28 at the moment. He'll be 29 this year. He's just signed a 2-year contract. I feel like that's really harsh.
So
I don't think he's going to get kicked out of Ferrari and then have nowhere else to go, even if he were to be kicked out of Ferrari, which I don't think will happen, bearing in mind we're not even at race 4 yet.
So the session is back underway. Nobody's anywhere near bothering going out, are they? We haven't. The rain it's not absolutely chucking it down.
Not a deluge.
It's not a deluge, but Russell is still sitting in his car, for example. So he's still sitting in his car.
Well, surely they've got to go out and. Is it not even worth trying? They've got to go out and try, just to try.
But if you as soon as you put on a set of intermediates, you're not going through. So if the track is only good enough for intermediates, you're not advancing. Like, you've just got zero chance. But then, I guess, get out the car. But then I guess you'd look a bit silly if you got out the car, like Kimi Räikkönen 2009 Malaysian Grand Prix style, when he knows that the session's ending, so he's just going to go get a chock ice.
Chock ice? Even the way you say chock ice is curious. It's such a thing of the past. A chock ice.
It was a chock ice, wasn't it? I'm sure it was a chock ice. But that's the weird thing. You can't just give up. But also, what are you waiting for in the last 7 minutes for the track to magically dry? Rob says the trouble with rain is it's wet.
We don't know.
And he's absolutely correct. That is the issue for the drivers at the moment. So I think that's going to be it. The order is Verstappen. We've got 7 minutes left on the clock. Verstappen, Sainz, Norris, Perez, Leclerc, the top 5. Alonso, Magnussen, Vettel, Ricciardo, Bottas, the top 10. Russell, Schumacher, Hamilton, Zhou and Stroll, the 15 drivers. Very curious scenario that everybody's just sort of... Hamilton too, sitting in the at the wheel of his Mercedes, I mean, just not really doing anything. Ricciardo's taken his helmet off and is having a beverage, but he is through to Q3, Ricciardo, most likely, so that makes sense why he would stay in the car, but it's just a bit weird seeing the other drivers sitting in the car.
Well, it's the warmest place to be, in fairness. Unless you're going to wrap yourself around a tyre blanket, you might as well try and stay a little bit warm, because the air temperature at the moment 12 degrees.
Well, they're just going to sit in there for the rest of the day.
Oh, dreamy. Every driver I've ever spoken to says they love to sleep in the cockpit. Who was it? Was it Sam that wanted to market a bed? Sam Bird? Bed in a cockpit?
It was me.
Oh, was it you?
It was me. It was my idea.
Oh, well, you're not a driver. You don't count. Well, you do count as a person.
Still my idea, yeah.
Okay, sorry, I stole your idea and gave it to somebody else.
Yeah.
Unknown Ceilings has asked the question, have Ferrari developed this car with Leclerc's style in mind, which might make the car tougher for Sainz to drive?
No, I'm sorry, I have to say that's a fallacy, that kind of question that people ask. The car is designed to be as quick as it'll be, and it has the characteristics that it has. And the drivers, both Ferrari drivers yesterday actually were saying that they like the same thing from the car anyway. So it's just a question of who's driving it quicker.
James asks, is it worth the drivers heading out for a lap on the Inters for some intel? I mean, that's an interesting point. Why you wouldn't, because if Q3 is going to be on we've got 5 minutes to go now. If Q3 is going to be on wet weather tyres, why not go out and see what the track's like? But if you then put it in the wall in the last few minutes of Q2 for no reason, you'll probably feel a little bit silly.
Well, there's still 5 minutes left, Jack, so they may yet do that. But they did have plenty of practice this morning, didn't they?
That's the other thing. Yeah, they had an hour in the wet conditions earlier on.
This would be a bit of a coup for Sebastian Vettel, wouldn't it? If he can get the Aston Martin into the final part of qualifying. He's currently sitting P8. He's had a horrible start to the season, missing the first two races through coronavirus. He qualified 17th after a litany of issues last time out in Australia, and retired from the race as well. So I think he'd be quite happy to stop the clock right now. Just take P8.
The clock is basically stopped at the moment, isn't it? Even though it is ticking down. Bottas as well looks like he'll be making it into Q3, although his incredibly long run of Q3 appearances was halted in Australia. Lance Stroll is now officially giving up and getting out of the car with less than 4 minutes to go. That is deemed the appropriately early enough amount of time to not have to sit in your car in order to keep up appearances.
That's so weird, isn't it?
Yeah, so Stroll has decided to get out.
So he's the first man to blink, so I'm guessing he'd be terrible at a game of poker. Maybe not.
Yeah, but he's going to be playing with big money. That's the thing.
He'd freak you out before we even started.
So Ashik says, surely if there's a red flag in qualifying, they ought to freeze the clock. Yeah, to be clear, they did freeze the clock while they got Sainz's car out of the way. Then they started the session again, but because it's a bit drizzly and rainy, no one's gone out on track because they won't be able to improve. The rain's coming down quite a bit, actually. This is going to be a really funky battle for pole position. There's no doubt about that, because all of the fans on the grandstands, on the banking, have all got their brollies up.
If Hamilton's out of qualifying, which it looks like he's going to be, qualifying in P13, if it stops like this, although I can hear someone going out, who's brave?
It's Vettel, so he's doing a sort of sighter on the intermediates, as we alluded to previously.
Don't stick it in the wall, then?
Yeah,
is that
exactly
what you're saying?
Yeah.
So Hamilton's not there. We know Verstappen goes well in wet weather. Who else is your money on for making it stick in the wet weather?
Well, here's a question, actually, off the back of that. Andrew,
are you failing to answer my question?
Well, no, I'm throwing it to Andrew. But is Leclerc? Have we seen stellar wet weather drives from Leclerc in the way that we know we have from a Verstappen and a Hamilton? You know, in particular, Hamilton too has got out of his car and headed back. Are there any standout wet drives from Leclerc?
Turkey 2020. He made up 30 seconds on Sebastian Vettel in half a race, his teammate.
Oh, and then did he get him on the final lap, or he was right with him on the final lap?
He would have been second. He made that mistake going into the final chicane on the final lap and lost 2 places to Perez and Vettel.
Okay.
But that was an outstanding performance from him in the wet. I just want to say as well, hats off to Sebastian Vettel and Aston Martin. 8th quickest. They've been on average 2.5 seconds off the pace, that team, so far this year. Vettel's only just over a second off Verstappen in Q2 there in the dry before the rain came down. They've obviously made a significant step forward with that car, and it's interesting looking at the submissions that the teams have put forward, which is a new development for this year. Here's some Leclerc radio.
Can you prepare the Rain X when I'm going back, the product for the visor?
Copy.
So can you prepare the product for the visor, which I guess is a bit of a...
stuff that you put on the visor to stop the water sticking to it. Exactly,
yeah, exactly. A little bit of a... What's the... Oh, this is too niche. What's the Harry Potter spell? When it's raining, when he's playing Quidditch, and they do the spell to make his eyes... to make his glasses not get water on them. Oh, I can't remember.
This is science, not magic.
Hashtag BBC F1.
Anyway, so just looking through those submissions, the team, Aston Martin say that one of the things they've done is they've moved the floor stay forwards to stiffen that part of the floor and minimise deflection to reduce ground contact. Remember I was saying earlier that we think that, people suspect, engineers and so on, suspect that the problem with the Mercedes is floor deflection somewhere. Seems like Aston Martin has identified a similar sorts of problem, and it may well, I don't know, but I'm just putting two and two together. It may well be that in stiffening that part of the floor, Aston Martin have found something that improves the performance of their car significantly. As I was saying, floor flexing can affect porpoising.
It's quite dry around quite a lot of the track. Down at Aqua Minerale, for example, it's pretty dry. Vettel now coming up to the top of the hill. George Russell is only now climbing out of his car, so he waited until the checkered flag fell before climbing out of the car, and then it gets very wet when you come back down towards Rivazza. So Variante Alta, Rivazza all the way to Tosa is pretty wet, but then sort of Tosa, Piratella, Aqua Minerale is pretty dry. So it's going to be a really challenging third part of qualifying in a few moments' time. Vettel comes across the line, 18 seconds slower than Max Verstappen, but just out there looking for some grip. Mick Schumacher knocked out, 12th on the grid for him, so it'll be Russell 11th, Schumacher 12th, Hamilton 13th, Joe 14th, and Stroll. I don't know what happened to Stroll, but his lap time was 8 seconds slower than Max Verstappen, so perhaps an error, perhaps traffic, or something similar. As Sergio Perez also went out to check on the conditions. The cars that didn't were Verstappen, Leclerc, Magnussen, Ricciardo and Bottas. So therefore Vettel, Alonso, Perez and Norris all went out on circuit. Someone mentioned here, Cameron said Lando Norris is very strong in the wet, so he could definitely have a good third part of qualifying. You remember how quick he was looking. Well, both here, he was on for a really good lap here, wasn't he, last year, and got done for track limits. Then he had that fight. Oh, he's nearly gone off the track. He's gone off the track, but he nearly ended up in the barriers there as he got two wheels on the curb on the way in, managed to keep it out of the gravel and out of the barriers. But that was a bit of a moment for Norris. As I say, was looking like it was going to be strong last season. And of course the Belgian Grand Prix last year in qualifying. Yeah, Carlos Sainz crashed out in the Ferrari, so it means both Mercedes are eliminated, meaning George Russell will start 11th on the grid, Lewis Hamilton will start 13th on the grid. Another horrible day this season for Mercedes. The pole position battle looks to be between Verstappen and Leclerc, and that's about to happen on Sports Extra. Impervious. Thank you to all of those who got in touch saying impervious is the spell. Jenny?
Oh, I see. You're talking about the spell.
Yeah.
That confused me. Just been looking into the Mercedes garage, and Toto Wolff always sits at the back of like the viewing gantries in the middle of the garage where all the engineers are. He was sitting there having a very heated and quite animated conversation with Lewis Hamilton. Now, Hamilton had just stepped out of the car, hadn't taken his helmet off, but there looked to be a real kerfuffle of senses between the two of them, and Toto Wolff pulling his hair and racking it forwards and back, and I wish I could have known what that conversation was, but clearly, I mean, the things that are happening at Mercedes at the moment they're not inexplicable, because there is a reason for them, and they need to try and work out exactly what it is and resolve it. But it must be very difficult for Hamilton right now. He's a 7-time world champion, competed for his 8th last year, and now he's behind Russell, P13. Yes, he's got a sprint race tomorrow to try and claw back some of that pace, but it's just so hard to fathom.
Yeah, it really is quite remarkable, the situation that Mercedes find themselves in particular about this, in particular in qualifying today. A little unfortunate maybe with the rain and the timings, but everybody had that first lap on the dry tyres. So Verstappen, Sainz, but Sainz crashed out. Norris, Perez, Leclerc, Alonso, Magnussen, Vettel, Ricciardo and Bottas. The drivers that will be advancing to the final part of qualifying, which is going to get underway in 3.5 minutes' time. The battle for pole position. Fascinated to see what tyre strategy the teams run, whether they go out on the intermediate tyres and just go round and round and round, or whether they come in for a new set of intermediate tyres, and they probably won't really know until they go out there. So a lot of questions too, because it's very dry at certain points on the track. The start-finish straight is pretty much bone dry. We had this last year as well with when the rain came. On the grid, absolutely dry. First corner at Tamburello, absolutely drenched. So we've kind of got a similar scenario here. It's going to be a real challenge.
A bit of a lottery. And as much as we like the sprint format, and we like it when the weather throws in a bit of a mixed up grid, you have to feel for the drivers, because they so cling on to consistency, regularity. They like everything to be metronomic, and in a session like this, which is a little bit delayed, a little bit wet, strange things are happening around them. I mean, it's a little bit intimidating for some like us who have never driven a Formula One car, but it's a huge opportunity as well, isn't it, for these 10 drivers who will go into the final part of qualifying. Bottas, Ricciardo, Vettel, Magnussen, Alonso, Leclerc, Perez, Norris, Sainz, Verstappen. I mean, the door is open. It's like a penalty shootout in a way.
I don't think Sainz will make it, but everybody else has certainly got a shot, haven't they? It's Verstappen or Leclerc. That's all I can really think of going into this session, though. And Verstappen has not had a pole position so far this year. And this is the thing with the sprints, is Verstappen has an opportunity to take a little bit more of a advantage out of Leclerc's championship lead. Because, okay, only by 1 point if he wins the sprint and Leclerc's second, but it all adds up come the end of the year. 90 seconds to go.
Just looking at last year and the year before, he's only qualified third. In fact, he qualified third in 20 and in 21, did Max Verstappen. Retired from the 20 race and went on to win the 21 iteration. But I think for him, fully focused, he's just got to go out there and absolutely nail it, and he's done a decent job so far. So for him, he knows what's at stake. He knows what he can gain from going out there and putting in a decent qualifying performance.
1 minute to go. We'll see whether everyone queues up at the end of the pit lane. I imagine that they will. Certainly, Kevin Magnussen in the Haas is getting ready to do just that. He's going out on the intermediate tyre. I imagine everybody will be on the intermediate tyre, and we'll have a closer look at when the track comes around, of what condition it's in. It's pretty damp leaving the pit lane. It's drier in some places than others. Charles Leclerc now is making his way towards the end of the pit lane. Also, in these conditions on a track like this, there's a real possibility of yellow flags, a real possibility of more red flags. Katrina says, love that Bottas is through to Q3 and neither Mercedes is. I think the Bottas fans will be enjoying that one a little bit. Fernando Alonso lining up at the end of the pit lane as the light goes green, and the session begins now as Verstappen gets ready to head out too. Fascinating to see what tyre strategies we use in this session, and whether it will get dry or not.
Sorry, Jack, you'd have to say, if you looked up and down the field and were looking for candidates who could excel in the wet weather, Fernando Alonso surely would be up there as one of those. Maybe this is a time for him to show what he could do.
Absolutely. 11 and a half minutes to go. And the car's now streaming out onto the circuit. Bit of a twitch for Charles Leclerc as he wobbled his way through the Tamburello chicane. Now they come up towards Tosa through the left-hander and start to climb the hill on this outlap. When will the quick laps come in during this session?
You can just see the dark, heavy clouds looming over the circuit, trying to give a little bit more rain, a little bit more precipitation, as you say, wet in some parts, dry in others.
Verstappen and Norris. Verstappen just leaves the pit lane now. Norris has not left the pit lane yet. So we'll wait for the McLaren driver to head out onto the circuit. Alonso, as I say, is the first driver out there. It's very, very dry. Very, very dry at Acqua Minerale. I would describe it as bone dry.
Ironic, given its name.
Yeah, very good. Very
Thanks.
good.
That's my one for the year. So all the drivers out there now. Remember, Carlos Sainz not taking part in this session, crashed out, saying he didn't get any warning he was going to lose it. He just lost it. Team radio.
The track is much drier than I thought.
But now Leclerc said that and has arrived at Ravazza, where the spray is streaming off the rear of the car. Max Verstappen has come through. Oh, he's had a little trip through a bit of gravel coming around the first chicane at Tamburello. Here comes Leclerc. 10 minutes to go in Q3. The battle for pole position, and the Ferrari of Charles Leclerc is across the line, down towards Tamburello, bouncing, porpoising his way into the first left-right chicane, trying to judge a braking point. He's done it reasonably well. Maybe a bit of a twitch on the exit. Now towards the Villeneuve chicane. Perez is following him on circuit. Leclerc through the left and then the right at Villeneuve and up towards Tosa. And Leclerc is 3/10 slower than Bottas in Sector 1. He's 6/10 slower than Perez in Sector 1. Not a good first couple of corners for Charles Leclerc.
Yeah, Perez is looking on fire though at the moment. He's having a really good lap so far, just trying to eke it out. He's had a good first sector. Halfway through the second sector, there's an incident out on track though, Jack.
Yeah, yellow flag in Sector 2. We'll see whether Leclerc comes across it or not. And it's Magnussen at Acqua Minerale. Kevin Magnussen off at Acqua Minerale in the Haas. Not sure if he's made it to the barriers or not, but he was, and there's another red flag. Red flag out. Everybody will return to the pit lane again.
They love a red flag, don't they, this weekend? They've dropped it very quickly on all the occasions it's happened, so that's ruined everybody's laps that they were on. So Perez was on a decent lap, Leclerc was on a decent lap at the time as well. That's not going to count for anything.
So Magnussen has hit the barrier, but only gently, I would suggest. He's trying to reverse out of the gravel trap. The sound you can hear is the Haas car, but he's got to reverse without... He doesn't want to go into the gravel and then get bogged down in the gravel. Now he's going to pick up first gear, and so this is going to be a very short stoppage, because Magnussen then chucks it into the gravel trap and will rejoin the circuit. I'm not even sure that the front wing is damaged, you know. It might be all right, Kevin Magnussen. So he'll go back to the pits. It'll be a very short red flag, and then we'll get action back underway in a minute or two, I'd have thought.
He's done a cracking job there to keep it out of the walls and then managed to get the car turned around. It's the same spot, I think, that Norris had a little one of a wandering through the gravel. Bottas as well in free practice 1. It all happened at the same point. So, yeah, Magnussen, that's the sound you can hear of his number 20 car, the Haas, just coming back with 8 minutes and 51 seconds left in this final part of qualifying.
Very similar to the Norris spin, just the back end went on entry and did a 360, didn't hit the barrier as he skidded through the gravel and then came to a halt and actually did very well. Just as he was coming to a halt, he booted the throttle to keep the wheels spinning and haul himself out of the gravel trap. That was but not hit the wall in front. That was actually pretty smart stuff from Kevin Magnussen as he gets going again. Session will resume at and that's the sound of the Haas team cheering Magnussen getting out of the gravel. Session will resume at 18:18, so that's in 4 minutes time. So again, a bit of a long turnaround, but there we go. Magnussen reversing back into the garage, or being pushed back into the garage, and he'll be able to head out and crack on again.
I have a feeling that's regulation, that once they've thrown the red flag, car comes back and it's a 5-minute warning for Session to restart. If I look in my mind for when I went on my stewarding course.
Yeah, no doubt it'll be something like that. So Verstappen, no one's put a lap time in, basically, because everybody who was behind Magnussen got caught out by the yellow flag. He was quite near the front of the queue. He might even have got to the front of the queue, because but then also the red flag came out. So even if you were ahead, like Fernando Alonso, you couldn't necessarily finish your lap. And I think Alonso had just come across was just coming towards the timing line. Getting a replay of Max Verstappen coming through Tamburello. Here's his radio.
Just quickly check the front end of the floor. Like I tapped that a bit on the outlet on the curb. I will have a look.
So that was Verstappen's moment at Tamburello, where he just he hit the sort of front of the floor a little bit when he hit the curbing on the exit of the chicane. Nothing too dramatic by the looks of things.
They've got a new little part on that car, actually, this weekend, Jack, which was just highlighted in the picture that they showed. It's a new floor splitter. So just where the floor entry point is, there's kind of like another bit underneath it. And to me, that looks very vulnerable, especially when you're talking curbs. These curbs, I don't think, are as aggressive as at some other tracks. If you think about Austria, the likes of that, I think there's the opportunity for absolute carnage on the floor. Now that they're ground effect, there's so much more going on to them. You've got to be a little bit careful.
So you're just hearing a replay of Charles Leclerc's lap, and you're hearing actually the porpoising, that bouncing that you're hearing is Leclerc bouncing up and down on the run towards Tamburello.
This is why it's such an anomaly, because you can look at Charles Leclerc or Carlos Sainz when he's in the Ferrari, and you see it bouncing, you see the porpoising, you see the effect it has, and then as he comes towards the braking point, applies brake, and the porpoising just goes away, and it doesn't seem to have a huge effect. But then you look at the Mercedes, and it's just not the same. It porpoises aggressively, but it doesn't soften out as they come towards the braking, and it's just very disruptive, which is why they're having to apply the brake and lift. Well, they're having to lift, not apply the brake, my apologies. So they're having to do that on the straight, which is just so disruptive to the way you drive the car, to what you're used to the speed, to everything. It's an actual headache for the drivers. It is not a pleasant experience. None of us have experienced it, but you talk to them, you listen to what they're saying. Horrible to go through.
It certainly is, and especially for the Mercedes drivers, because it brings with it no speed either. And there'll be less than 9 minutes on the clock when the session gets going again. Still 2.5 minutes away from that. That's a group of Fernando Alonso fans, and Alonso is queued up at the edge, at the end of the pit lane, looking forward to getting out on track again.
Nice that they've got something to cheer about finally. I'm pleased for them. Just a quick question for you. So Hamilton will start the sprint race from P13, barring any kind of gearbox issues or whatever for people ahead of him. Can he climb back from that? Is this a car that's much better suited to racing than it is to qualifying?
Well, firstly, an apology, I suppose, because Will has sent a very annoyed email that we dismissed your suggestion that he might struggle in Q1, and you're absolutely right. So my apologies to Jenny and to Will.
Thanks, Jack.
He can, I still don't think that's the sort of necessarily the true pace of the car, but it's come back through to where? That's the thing. Like, yeah, maybe he could come back through to 5th or 6th, but that's sort of it. He's not going to come back through to win in a normal Grand Prix, and he is aided by the sprint, as he was in Brazil last year, because he's got more time to make up places.
And I think that's what I mean. If you look back to Brazil, it was such a phenomenal fight back for him. What did he make that, like 25 places across the course of the weekend or something absolutely ridiculous? He's got a very different car. It's a very different proposition. He's not in the place to even fight for a win. So I just wonder how much he can fight back. We know that their kind of comfortable place is best of the rest, so P5, P6. What will happen come Saturday, come Sunday? It's exciting and a little bit scary I think for people who are Mercedes fans who feel like they're into the unknown.
And a lot of it will depend on who starts where ahead of them. Cars out on track, 7 minutes and 20 seconds on the clock. All 9 drivers have joined the circuit, and Fernando Alonso is going to be the first driver to get on the power out of Ravazza on a dry part of circuit. Bit of spray as he comes down towards Tamburello. And he starts his flying lap. Next behind him is going to be Valtteri Bottas. Then it'll be Leclerc will be ahead of Verstappen on the road as Alonso fights the car. Whoa, bit of a slide as he got on the power on the exit of Tamburello. Now into the Villeneuve chicane. Down 3 gears, 4 gears, and then on the power towards Tosa. Alonso's first sector is a 28.6, which is just over a tenth quicker than Kevin Magnussen. Leclerc is still on his outlap, so is Verstappen. Jenny?
Yeah, just looking at Magnussen in that Haas, a lot of people saying, oh, it's very much like the Ferrari this year. Well, I tell you what, it's going really well at the moment with Kevin Magnussen behind the wheel. He's doing a cracking job following around Fernando Alonso.
Yep. Oh, no, he doesn't want to be following Alonso there because the Spaniard just slithered off at Acqua Minerale, second part of the corner, and that is Alonso's lap done for this lap at least. So Kevin Magnussen is the next driver, comes through the middle sector. He's a tenth up on oh no, that was Verstappen's outlap actually. Bottas comes through the middle sector and he is quicker than Magnussen in sectors 1 and 2, not by a huge amount. Sergio Perez, I think, has been off at the first corner, so Perez has been off at Tamburello. Magnussen is coming through Ravazza now in the Haas. Gets on the power, drives towards the line. Norris sets the fastest middle sector, and Magnussen goes quickest. A 1 minute 30.035. The only driver to have set a lap time so far, but Verstappen, Norris and Leclerc all going quicker than Magnussen. Bottas slots into second place. Norris now goes quicker, a 1 minute 29.968. But again, Verstappen and Leclerc are going faster than that still. The sound you can hear is Sebastian Vettel in the Aston Martin driving to the line. He slots into 4th place ahead of Sergio Perez, who, as I said, made that mistake a few moments ago. Ricciardo goes quicker than Norris. 5 minutes to go. Good lap from Daniel Ricciardo. But Charles Leclerc is going quickly. Fernando Alonso is going quickly too. Magnussen improving this time through. Leclerc to the top now. A 1 minute 28.7. That's 1 second quicker than the McLarens. Big lap from Charles Leclerc, and Verstappen can only go into second, and he is a second away. And sorry, he's 200ths away. So Verstappen 200ths slower than Leclerc on that first lap. That is incredibly tight. Leclerc looks like he's doing another push lap. So they just keep going flat out around there. Norris is on another quick lap. He comes through the middle sector now, and compared to Charles Leclerc, he is 3 tenths up.
Could be more rain incoming.
And that's why they keep pushing, because Verstappen being told there could be more rain coming.
Yeah, just having a look at Verstappen and his placement. He's the man last on the lap, so he's just following around Charles Leclerc. They're so close on track to each other, it's incredible.
Verstappen coming through the middle sector. Leclerc has backed off on this lap. So a bit of a mistake somewhere for Charles Leclerc, I imagine, at Tosa, and he's lost a bit of ground. Norris comes through and he's 3 tenths away. He gets ahead of Magnussen, 3 tenths away from Leclerc and Verstappen. But Verstappen is 1.1 seconds up on Leclerc after 2 sectors. He's absolutely flying, but there is a yellow flag out there in sector 3 down at Ravazza, and he has to back off. It's Magnussen. Magnussen's pulled off at the side of the circuit. So there's a yellow flag out with 3 minutes and 20 seconds to go. So Verstappen will need to go for another lap and hope that he can push. But actually it's Bottas, my apologies. It's Valtteri Bottas that has pulled off the exit of Acqua Minerale. Verstappen still goes quicker though. Now he definitely backed off We were on board with him. He definitely backed off, coming past the yellow flag zone, but was still able to go faster. And now another red flag. Red flag is out for Bottas, who's pulled off at the side of the road. The order is Verstappen, Leclerc, Norris, Magnussen, Alonso, the top 5, Ricciardo, Perez, Bottas, Vettel, the 9 drivers.
And the car of Bottas, the Alfa Romeo, just sliding down the hill, and actually Bottas has to go out and try and stop it so that it doesn't get away from him. He's parked it up quite nicely on the grass verge, just at 16, and I think there is an inlet just there, so he's flagging to the marshals to come and help him. Steering wheel's just sitting on top, and he's just trying to work out what to do with the car. Doesn't look like he's got any damage to it, Jack, so technical.
Yeah, it looks like a pulled off sort of vibe for Valtteri Bottas. It'll be a tough one to push it back up that hill on slippery grass. We're about to just getting a replay of Verstappen having quite a big lockup into turn 1, and that was just as the red flag came out, actually. So he was about to start another flying lap, locked up, but the red flag was out when he skated through the gravel. So he did improve under yellow flags, Max Verstappen, but we were on board with him at the time. I'm pretty confident he backed off a lot. He certainly seemed to back off a lot, but there were discussions about this sort of thing recently, weren't there, where aren't you meant to completely abandon the lap if you come across a yellow flag? I feel like that was sort of a half rule brought in because of Verstappen himself when he took pole position in Mexico City.
I honestly can't remember the rule.
No.
And I think the key thing is we've got a new race director this year, so we don't know how, and also the stewards will rule on it, but we don't know how they're going to deal with that. He clearly backed off sufficiently in that section, and but he did at the same time improve by a second, or nearly a second, to go, what is he, 7 or 8 tenths ahead of Leclerc now?
But he was 1.1 seconds up on the entry to the chicane,
so
wasn't he?
3/10 back off in that sector, it would seem. It's going to be interesting to see how they view that. I'm guessing, I think he'll get away with it, but it might cause a bit of controversy.
Is this similar to Perez? We've seen Perez investigated. Was that in Saudi or last time out? I feel like it was in Saudi where he was investigated for having... I can't remember which one it was, but he was investigated for not easing off or not lifting off enough, and that actually Red Bull were cleared of it. They were found to have lifted and it was absolutely fine. So we have got prior with Niels Vitic in this season and their rulings of it and how they look at it.
Yeah, because Qatar last year was another one, wasn't it, where Verstappen got done, didn't he, for when Gasly had pulled over at the side of the circuit.
Qatar was a whole other mess, wasn't it, with people sending messages to other people saying, yeah, but look, you can see the yellow flags waving, and then Christian Horner saying it was a rogue marshal and then having to apologise. Yeah, that was messy. Let's not go back there. Those were the bad times of last year.
Just seeing the replay there, Jack, not only did he lift off, he actually changed down.
Yeah, he changed down. I mean, he was coming towards the braking zone anyway for Rivazza, but he definitely backed off. There's no doubt about that. It's whether that is sufficient or whether you're meant to abandon the lap, because I'm sure there was some talk about that, but we will see what happens with Verstappen. It may be that they all improve anyway when they go out again with 3 minutes on the clock. We don't have a time that the session will start again. Thank you for sticking with us, by the way. I thought we'd be done it half an hour ago, but here we are, still here.
Gift that keeps on giving, Jack.
Yeah, exactly.
Today.
Exactly.
And there's even better news, which is that it's begun to rain again. So let's see what happens out there. At the moment, the order: Verstappen, Leclerc, Norris, Magnussen, Alonso, Ricciardo, Perez, Bottas, who stopped out on track, and then Vettel and Sainz not taking part in this session.
So 2 minutes and 58 seconds will be on the clock when the session gets back underway. That'll be enough. I don't think it's going to be enough for 2 timed laps, is it? It's just going to be enough for 1 timed lap. It's going to be a 1 lap shootout at the end of this session, and the order, well, Jenny just read it out. Alonso managed to improve on his 2nd lap after making that mistake at Aqua Minerali first time around, and Vettel then in 9th position. Sainz, as it stands, would start the Grand Prix in 10th place, but as Jenny alluded to earlier, maybe they would change some parts, or maybe would have to change a gearbox or something like that. Rain expected at, well, now 6:29. The forecast says rain is expected. It is now 6:29. Still no news on when the session is going to restart. They're still clearing away Bottas's car. It was a good first lap from Ricciardo, but then Norris got him back. Magnussen doing well there in 4th place. Sergio Perez made a mistake on his first flying lap, managed to improve on the second, but only went 7th quickest, with Bottas and Vettel the only two slower. The rain is now coming down, a bit of drizzle, but it's difficult to know what the track conditions were like beforehand, because in Q2, when we had this sort of scenario, it was bone dry, and then any rain, you're going to be going slower because you need to be on intermediate tyres, whereas here might be a little different. If you're already on the intermediates, you're not losing out quite so dramatically.
The question will be when they decide to go out and start queuing, when we know when this session is going to restart, because we saw it last time. A lot of the drivers went towards the lights at the end of the pit lane and waited there, and actually they lost so much tyre temperature that it was a pointless kind of act. If they'd have just stayed in their garages and waited, they might have been better off. But sometimes it's a lose-lose situation. You want to get out there, you want to get track position, you want to see if you can get 2 laps, but yet by doing so, you lose all the tyre temperature that you've built up, or that you've built up in the garage under the tyre blankets.
Yeah, absolutely. So just having a look at but again, this was under Michael Massey's race direction, and he said last year that in order for the stewards to be satisfied that a driver has complied with the requirements to slow down and reduce speed significantly, it must be clear he has not attempted to set a meaningful lap time. For practical purposes, any driver in a double yellow sector will have that lap time deleted. Now, that was the past, but that, to me, is that lap from Verstappen isn't allowed. But Michael Massey's not the race director anymore, so it's all a little bit up in the air. Yeah, we're still going. We've got another red flag in Imola, and that is because Valtteri Bottas broke down while he was trying to set a lap time. Verstappen went past him during yellow flag conditions. He backed off. He set the quickest time. So at the moment, Verstappen is on provisional pole position. Charles Leclerc is second for Ferrari, but we will have another 3 minutes of action when the session resumes. Andrew Benson.
So, Jack, in the event notes for this weekend, on double-waved yellow flags during free practice and qualifying, in order for the stewards to be satisfied that any such driver has complied with these requirements, which is to be prepared to change direction or stop, it must be clear he has not attempted to set a meaningful lap time. For practical purposes, any driver in a double yellow sector will have that lap time deleted.
Now, big question, was it a double?
Don't know.
Not sure if it was a double. That's the big question there. Those are the rules then. So if it was a double waved yellow flag, that lap, and the reason this is important is if there is more rain and nobody improves, that's the pole position lap. Now, if it was just single yellows, which I feel like for a car by the side of the circuit stationary, it may be a single waved yellow, in which case ease off is fine. So that's now the crucial thing to discover as to whether it was a double waved yellow. So we'll try and get to the bottom of that one now as we do our little best sort of Miss Marple investigation impressions. Jenny.
Yeah, just having a read through some of your messages. Thank you, by the way, for getting in touch with us, especially on delayed sessions like this. It means a lot. Hashtag BBC F1. Jeremiah says, it's unbelievable and painful to watch the silver arrows bouncing more than a basketball. We can only hope for a pole lap solution. And I think the team have been very clear in saying that there is no silver bullet for the silver arrow yet. they don't even know 100% what's going on with it. So yeah, a lot of head scratching going on there. Valtteri Bottas has finally managed to get himself in a vehicle to come back in. He's actually got on top of the flatbed recovery truck that is coming back to the pit lane. And I don't think you usually see the driver climbing in there. They normally get back in a different way, but that's quite nice to see. He's waving at everybody on his way back. It's not quite the mode of transport he'd be wishing for, but the session will resume at local time 18:38. So we have 5 minutes to go. 4 minutes to go now.
4 minutes to go then before the session gets back underway. Rain is coming down. Just looking at the messaging system, there was a yellow in track sector 16, but I don't know if the timing session says if it's double yellow or single yellow. So we'll try and get to the bottom of that. But as it is, we'll just treat the rest of the session as it is. But I get the feeling that something would have happened by now were it a double waved yellow and a car pulled off by the side of the track. If a car has not crashed and there's no marshals on circuit, that would tend to be covered by a single yellow. So I think Verstappen will be all right with that lap. Would be my prediction. But we'll wait and see. Less than 2 minutes to go. Rain is coming down a little bit. It's not exactly bucketing it down though. It'll be worth the drivers going out and seeing if they can improve.